She had the window seat, which she hadn't asked for. The gate agent had reassigned her at check-in. Something about the flight being overbooked in the middle section, about a seat swap that benefited everyone, about how the window was actually nicer on this particular route because you could see the Appalachians if the clouds stayed low. She'd said thank you and taken the boarding pass without looking at it. Her name on the ticket read Sarah Cole. That was the name on her credit card, which was a real card attached to a real account that had a real address in Virginia Beach, and all of that was accurate as far as it went. The credit card was paid on time every month by an automatic transfer from an account that had a different name and a different routing number, and existed in a financial institution that was not listed in any consumer database. She found row 14, stowed her bag, a single black carry-on, medium size, packed with the particular efficiency of someone who has learned that everything you bring should fit in overhead, always, and sat down. She was wearing dark gray jeans, a fitted navy blue crew neck sweater with the sleeves pulled to the wrist, and low ankle boots that had real miles on them. Her hair was dark and pulled back loosely, a few strands at the temples. No jewelry, no makeup. The kind of face that people looked at once and then looked away from, not because it wasn't interesting, it was in the particular way of faces that are precise and contained, the way an instrument is precise. It didn't invite sustained looking. It was a face designed over long and deliberate practice to be unremarkable. She buckled her seatbelt. She took out a book, a dog-eared paperback history of the Pacific Theater in the Second World War, 617 pages, small type, the margins annotated in pencil, and opened it to page 312. The man in 14A arrived 3 minutes before boarding closed his name. She would learn without meaning to over the course of the next 3 hours was Marcus Webb. He was approximately 38. He traveled frequently for work, pharmaceutical sales. She inferred from his phone conversations before the door closed, and had opinions about seat assignments that he expressed freely, opinions about the overhead space that he expressed at higher volume, and opinions about the flight attendant's timing with the pretzels that he kept to himself. Though barely he settled into 14A with the settling energy of a man who has decided that his comfort is the primary organizing variable of any space he enters. He looked at her. "Business or pleasure?" he asked. "Neither," she said without looking up. He waited a moment to see if there was more. There wasn't. The door closed. The engine spun up. The aircraft began to move. She turned a page. They were at cruising altitude, 35,000 feet somewhere over central Tennessee, when Marcus Webb made his second attempt at conversation. She had been reading for 41 minutes without stopping, which he seemed to find either remarkable or an implicit challenge to his social presence. He had watched 2 episodes of a television show with the volume at the upper limit of the airline's earbuds, eaten the pretzels before the flight attendant finished coming down the row, ordered a Coke he didn't drink, and taken approximately 1 photographs of the cloud layer through the window that she was sitting next to, reaching past her to get the angle without once acknowledging that he was doing it. "Long book," he said. "Yes," she said. "What's it about?" "The Battle of Midway." He waited. "Military history buff?" he asked. She turned a page. Not as a dismissal, it simply happened to be the right moment to turn the page. "My dad was in the Navy. Marcus Webb offered, settling into the rhythm of a man who talks when he is uncomfortable and does not know he is uncomfortable. Nothing major. Supply chain logistics. He was at Pearl Harbor, not during the attack, after. For the rebuild. But still, he paused. You know how it is. She did not know how it was, specifically, but she understood the anecdote's function and declined to engage with it. You're not much of a talker, he said. No, she said. She turned another page. The thing about long flights in window seats is that they create a specific kind of environmental awareness. You cannot fully retreat. The person beside you is 4 inches away. You hear their breathing, their phone games, the small sounds of their physical existence. She was aware of Marcus Webb, the way she was always aware of the people immediately around her, automatically, continuously, without deciding to be. And she noted that he was fundamentally harmless and fundamentally incurious in any direction that mattered, and so she let him settle into the background of her attention and kept reading. She was thinking about Admiral Nimitz, about the decision in June 1942 to commit American carriers to an engagement that the Navy's cryptanalysts believed they understood and that a commanding admiral had to commit to based on intelligence that could have been wrong. The decision to act on incomplete information because the cost of inaction was unacceptable. She had made that calculation herself in different theaters under different circumstances. She found Nimitz's thought process instructive. The book was good. She was on page 347 when Marcus Webb fell asleep. She was on page 371 when the intercom clicked. The voice was steady and measured in the specific way that flight crew are trained to be steady and measured, which is a register that sounds calmer than normal human speech and which most passengers find reassuring and which she identified immediately as reading. Captain Ellison was reading from something prepared. We're going to be making a small adjustment to our route this afternoon. Nothing that affects your comfort or safety. We'll be diverting to Langley Regional Airport in Hampton, Virginia, instead of our scheduled destination. The airline will have ground transportation and accommodation assistance standing by at the gate. We apologize for any inconvenience and appreciate your patience. The cabin stirred. The sound of 100 people checking phones simultaneously, which was a particular sound, a communal rustling, the hiss of seatbelts being undone, the murmur of people checking whether other people were having the same reaction they were having. A few people asked the flight attendants questions that the flight attendants answered with the same information in slightly different words. Marcus Webb woke up. What's happening? Diversion, she said. Why, she didn't answer. She was looking out the window. She had been looking out the window since the second sentence of Captain Ellison's announcement, because the second sentence had told her what she needed to know. Nothing affects your comfort or safety. Which meant the reason for the diversion was not a reason that the airline was comfortable disclosing on the aircraft, which narrowed the possibilities considerably. And because Langley Regional Airport sat 4 miles from Joint Base Langley Eustis, home of the 1st Fighter Wing, home of the 94th Fighter Squadron, home of the only operational squadron of F-22 Raptors on the East Coast. She folded her hands in her lap. She breathed slowly. She had stopped being surprised by certain categories of thing approximately 9 years ago, which was when her career had entered the phase that required her to stop being surprised. The surprise didn't help, had never helped, and she had eventually processed the category of things that produced it out of her active emotional inventory. She did not look surprised. Marcus Webb, watching her look out the window with a stillness he couldn't quite interpret, said, "Are you okay?" "Fine," she said. "Completely fine." She looked back at her book. The descent profile was steeper than standard commercial. The aircraft came down at an angle that said someone wanted them on the ground sooner than the fuel calculation required, which meant there was a ground timeline, which meant the ground had planned for their arrival. She noted this through the physical sensation of the descent rather than the window, and confirmed it through the window at 8,000 feet when the cloud layer broke. She saw the aircraft on the outer taxiway, even from altitude at 8,000 feet, through a commercial window with the mid-afternoon sun at an angle. The shapes were unmistakable if you knew what you were looking at. Low, delta-winged, the angular stealth surfaces that caught the light wrong, 4 of them, positioned with their noses pointed toward the runway. Not parked, staged. F-22 Raptors, engines running. She looked at them for 4 seconds. 4 aircraft on alert. A commercial flight diverted to a joint base airfield with no public explanation. A cabin full of people who were about to spend the next several hours rescheduling their connections and speculating about weather or mechanical issues, while the actual reason their flight had been diverted would be handled in the part of the base that did not appear on any commercially available map. She put the Pacific War book in her carry-on bag. She zipped it. She checked that the zipper was fully closed. She checked the laces on her ankle boots, not because they were loose, but because checking things that need to be in order before something moves quickly is a habit so deeply seated that it requires no thought. The hands just do it. The wheels touched the runway at 4:17 p.m. The aircraft rode. The engines went to reverse thrust. The passengers began gathering their things with the anxious energy of people who had somewhere else to be and were now somewhere they hadn't planned on. She sat in 14B and waited for the cabin to empty. She had waited until the cabin was fully empty. Marcus Webb, the family with 3 children, the businessman in 12C who had been on a laptop for the entire flight and was now on a phone. She had waited until they were all gone, and then she retrieved her carry-on. The terminal at Langley Regional was small. 6 gates, 1 carousel, a Dunkin' that was closed, a newsstand that was open. The sudden arrival of a full commercial flight's worth of passengers had created a managed confusion at the gate airline staff, with tablets and apologetic expressions, the particular organizational language of an unplanned situation. She came through the gate door and stopped. Not because of the confusion, not because of the gate staff, or the anxious passengers, or the closed Dunkin'. She stopped because of the man at the edge of the gate area, standing slightly apart from the crowd, as though he'd been placed there rather than arrived there. Dark slacks, blue shirt, no tie, the brand of unremarkable that only reads as unremarkable if you're not looking for it. He was holding a piece of paper, 1 word on it, 2 syllables. Not Sarah Cole. It was a word that had been assigned to her in a room she was cleared to access by people she was cleared to know in the context of a program that did not have a public name. It was the word that meant her, not the her that boarded commercial flights and paid credit card bills and had a library card from the Virginia Beach Public Library. The other her, the one who existed in the files with the narrow distribution lists. The one that cost, according to a training cost estimate, she'd been shown once and found faintly absurd, $13.1 million to produce. She looked at the paper. She looked at the man holding it. He gave one nod. She walked toward him. Marcus Webb, rescheduling his connection on his phone 20 feet away, watched her walk past. He noticed that she had her bag with her and that she was walking toward someone, and that this was unusual given that most people in this terminal were walking toward the airline desk. He watched her for about 3 seconds. Then his call connected and he looked away. He never saw the door she walked out of. His name was Brewster, and he had driven 2 hours to hold a piece of paper in a regional airport terminal. He had done stranger things for this specific program, and he had stopped cataloging them years ago. He walked beside her toward the exterior doors, speaking quietly and completely without preamble. "There's a situation developing at Langley," he said. "Joint Base, the 94th. She was already doing the math in her head. 94th Fighter Squadron, the F-22s she'd seen on the taxiway from altitude, 4 aircraft. Why me? She said. "I'm stateside. The other 3 people current on this profile are in theater," he said. "You were the closest." He paused. "You were also on a commercial flight 40 miles from the base at the right moment, which I've given up trying to figure out if that's planning or luck." "What's the profile?" she said. She listened without interrupting, eyes forward, her face doing nothing in particular. "Timeline?" she said. 90 minutes to wheels up. We moved that up from 2 hours when your flight confirmed the diversion." She looked at the black SUV at the curb engine running, tinted windows. "Fuel load?" she asked. "Full," he said. "All 4 aircraft." She changed in the vehicle on the 7-minute drive. Civilian clothes exchanged for a flight suit with her rank and wings already on it. The helmet bag in the back seat, a mission tablet that she read from the moment the vehicle started moving. She read the documents. Once, she did not read them again. When the SUV reached the flight line gate, she had already closed the tablet and set it on the seat beside her. She looked out the window at the 4 Raptors on the taxiway, their engine exhausts shimmering in the cold November air, and something in her face settled into the expression it wore in those specific environments, still focused, already thinking about things that were 40,000 feet. The crew chiefs saw the vehicle approach the flight line. They had been told a pilot was coming. They had not been told who. They had, on the flight line of a fighter squadron, learned that certain information was not theirs to receive before the moment required it, and they had accepted this the way professionals accept the parameters of their work. Master Sergeant Hollins, 14 years on the flight line, the kind of experience that makes a person quiet in a particular way, watched the black SUV stop and watched the door open and watched a woman in a flight suit step out and begin walking toward the aircraft. He came to attention. He didn't decide to. His heels came together, and his back straightened, and his chin came up in the automatic way of the body responding to something it recognizes as having a specific kind of weight. He'd felt this response 3 times in 14 years on the flight line. This was the 4th. The other crew chiefs followed him, 2 immediately, 1 with a slight delay as his brain caught up to his instincts. She walked toward aircraft 07-4,161. Without acknowledging the attention, not because she was dismissive, but because acknowledging it would have required slowing down. Nose to tail, clockwise, hands on surfaces. She moved through it with a fluency that Hollins had seen in perhaps a dozen pilots in his career. The kind of pre-flight that comes from having done it so many times in so many conditions that the knowledge is in the hands and not in the mind. She found the actuator stiffness at the left leading edge flap. A minor resistance in the mechanism. Something the maintenance logs hadn't flagged. Something the sensors hadn't caught. She felt it through the palm of her hand in the same way you feel a slightly loose hinge through the palm of your hand. Before you know what you're feeling, you know something is there. She looked at Hollins. He called it in immediately. A technician arrived in 4 minutes. The evaluation took 3. The clearance took 1. She climbed a boarding ladder without rushing. She settled into the cockpit. She adjusted the seat height and the pedal position and ran through the pre-start checklist with the fluency of a person doing something so fundamental. It has become part of the physical landscape of their body. The canopy came down. The engine spun up. The world outside the cockpit became irrelevant. Major Denny Carver had been on alert for 6 hours and 40 minutes when the black SUV pulled up to the flight line. He was standing near the ops trailer with Captain Reese Ito and First Lieutenant Sasha Drummond, the 3 of them in the particular stillness of pilots who have been waiting for something to happen. They had been told a 4th pilot was coming. They had not been told anything else. Carver watched the woman get out of the vehicle. He watched the crew chiefs come to attention before she'd covered 20 feet of taxiway. He watched Hollins, 14 years on the flight line, a man who Carver had never seen come to attention for anything less than a wing commander, straighten up before she'd said a word. "You know who that is," Carver said to Ito. Ito was already watching. He had a longer peripheral horizon than most people, which was one of the reasons he was good in the air. He watched her move toward the aircraft. He watched the way she walked, the contained particular efficiency of a person for whom physical movement is considered an economical act. "Jace Feven," Ito said. He said it quietly, the way you say something you're not entirely sure you're supposed to be saying. "Yeah," Carver said. Drummond, first operational tour. The youngest person on the flight line looked at both of them. "Who's Ghost 7? Carver told her. He told her the version that could be told to someone with her clearance level, which was not the full version, but was enough of it that Drummond's expression shifted over about 8 seconds from curiosity to something that was harder to name. She watched the woman complete the walk around. She watched her find the actuator, issue, find it by touch, in the first pass, faster than the maintenance logs. She watched her wait out the technician's evaluation with a stillness that was different from patience, because patience is a virtue you exercise. This was something else. This was the absence of any relationship to time as a constraint. "She's the one who—" Drummond started. "Yeah," Ito said. Drummond was quiet. She was calculating something. She had a good mathematical mind. It was part of what had gotten her to an F-22 squadron at 26. And she was calculating. in the way of someone with the relevant data points. The probability that the things she had heard about Go-7 were accurate. She concluded that they were. "I want to buy her a drink after this," Drummond said. "Get in line," Carver said. They watched the canopy close over the cockpit of O7-4,161. 14-year-old military asset, $143 million unit cost, the most capable air superiority fighter ever built, designed to be flown by the top fraction of a percent of a pilot force that was itself. He had 4,100 hours in fighters. He was good. He knew the exact shape of his own competence. He looked at the aircraft with GOST-7 in the cockpit. He keyed his radio. Flight check-in. 3 responses came back. Hers was last. 2 syllables, her call sign. Flat and clean and without any performance in it. Carver released the transmit button. "Ready," he said, to no one in particular. The taxi order came at 5:01 p.m. This had not been explicitly briefed. The structure they'd been given had Carver as flight lead. He was the senior pilot. She had come in as a specialist. The hierarchy was technically his. But when the aircraft sequenced onto the taxiway, she was at the front and Carver moved behind her. Later, when Ito asked him about it, Carver said he didn't have a clean explanation. It was a flight line decision. You feel the right answer before you think the right answer, and the right answer was she was in front. The 4 Raptors queued at the threshold of the runway. At full power, an F-22 Raptor produces 70,000 pounds of thrust. It can reach 60,000 feet in under 2 minutes. Its top speed at altitude is classified, but the unclassified ceiling is twice the speed of sound, and pilots who have flown it suggest the classified number is considerably higher. She went first. The aircraft rolled. The runway disappeared beneath it. At approximately 1,800 feet of concrete consumed, the aircraft lifted and climbed at an angle that would have seemed impossible to anyone watching from the ground, who had only ever seen commercial aircraft take off, the nose pointing nearly vertical. The whole thing climbing into the cloud layer with a noise that pressed against the chest of everyone on the flight line and didn't let go for a full second after the aircraft was already gone. 3 more followed her up at 8-second intervals. The runway went quiet. The cloud layer closed over them. Master Sergeant Hollins stood at the edge of the taxiway and watched where they'd gone and breathed the cold air and thought about the actuator catch and the walk around and the way her hands had moved across the surface of the aircraft. He went back to work. In the operational record, the version that existed in the classification level, accessible to people who handled the administrative functions of the 1st Fighter Wing, the flight on the 14th of November at 17:01 hours was listed as a training exercise. 4 aircraft, 3 hours of flight time, returned to base at 2,002 hours without incident. The other record, the one that existed in a different database under a different classification with a distribution list of 9 names, described a different flight. She was the element-led. The mission profile was a specific type that the Air Force had a specific word for, which was a word that meant something very particular about the conditions and the timeline and what needed to happen. She flew lead for 3 hours. During those 3 hours, she made 12 discrete decisions that mattered. Some of them were decisions in the conventional sense, choices evaluated, options compared. Others were something faster than that. The F-22 cockpit, at the speeds and altitudes and engagement geometries that this mission involved, does not provide the leisure of deliberation. The pilot is the decision. She was the decision for 3 hours. At 8:02 p.m., all 4 aircraft were back on the ground at Langley. She was out of the cockpit and in the debriefing vehicle before Carver had the canopy. The vehicle was already moving when he got out of his aircraft and looked toward where she'd been. The parking spot was empty. Hollins was already starting the post-flight inspection on 07-4161. Ito came up beside Carver. "Yeah," Carver said. "You going to see the debrief report?" Carver thought about this. "Probably not," he said. Above my level." Ito nodded. The 3 of them stood at the edge of the flight line in the November cold, the runway lights coming on in the early dark, the base settling into its evening rhythm around them. "She going to be okay?" Drummond asked. Neither of them answered immediately, because neither of them knew the answer, and they were all people who didn't say things they didn't know. "I think she's always okay," Ito said finally. "I think okay is not really the relevant category." Drummond looked at the empty parking spot where 07-4,161 sat in its post-flight cooling, the canopy still raised, the ladder still leaning against the fuselage. "I'm going to remember this for the rest of my career," she said. Neither of the other 2 argued with her. 3 weeks later, on a Sunday evening in Hampton Roads, Major Denny Carver told his wife about GHOSTSEVN. He told her carefully. "The way you tell things when you're working the line between what you can say and what you need to say to make the story make sense to someone who matters to you." His wife was a nurse. She had the specific quality of attention that nursing teaches, the ability to hear what's actually being said as opposed to what's being performed. He told her about the 6-hour alert, the vehicle pulling up, the crew chiefs coming to attention before she'd covered 20 feet of taxiway. He told her about the actuator catch, about the taxi and giving up the lead without being told to, about the radio exchange with Ito over the runway threshold. He told her about the 3 hours and the 12 decisions, which he described only in the most general terms, the ones that didn't require any particular clearance to understand. He told her about the empty parking spot. His wife listened to all of it. Then she was quiet for a moment. "Is she okay?" she asked. He looked at her. "From the flight," his wife said. "She was gone before I got the canopy open." His wife nodded. She picked up her coffee cup and looked at it. "What's her name?" she asked. "I only know the call sign," he said. "GOST." About the terminal at Langley Regional, about the piece of paper Brewster had been holding, about the 97 passengers who had eaten their pretzels and rescheduled their connections and gone home with a story about a weird diversion that they would tell for years, about the empty parking spot, about the ladder still leaning against the fuselage of 07-4161 in the dark. "Because she's there," he said slowly, "and then she's not. And the only proof she was ever present is what she left behind." His wife was quiet. "And what did she leave behind?" she asked. Carver looked at his coffee cup. A cleared mission, he said, and a crew chief who's going to be talking about that walk-around for the rest of his career. His wife smiled the small specific smile she used when something confirmed something she already understood. Sounds like the right kind of person, she said. There aren't many of them, Carver said. At a dinner party in suburban Cincinnati, on the same Sunday evening that Carver was sitting at his kitchen table, Marcus Webb was telling the story of the diversion. He had been telling it since it happened. He had a good version of it, now, polished from 8 or 9 tellings, the structure tightened, the weird details in the right places. He told the part about Captain Ellison's announcement, and the part about Langley Regional being a military airport, and the part about the terrible Dunkin' being closed, and the accommodation vouchers taking forever. And then he told the part about the woman in 14B. He told it the way you tell the part about a minor character who adds texture, slightly odd, slightly memorable, a small mystery that he had no real interest in solving, but that made the story better. She wouldn't talk the entire flight, he said, just reading this huge military history book, completely still-like, more still than people normally are. He shook his head. And then the diversion happens, and we land, and everyone's trying to figure out what's going on, and she just walks off with this guy who's waiting for her. Has a sign with something on it. Not her name. Or at least not what I thought was her name, and then she's just gone. Government, someone asked. Had to be, he said. She had this vibe, like she already knew the diversion was coming before they announced it, which is probably just my imagination. But, he shrugged, whatever. He picked up his wine. He did not think about the woman in 14B very often after that dinner party. She faded into the category of interesting encounters that don't resolve into anything, which most interesting encounters don't. 700 miles east of that dinner party, at approximately the same moment, a woman in dark gray jeans and a navy sweater was walking across the parking lot of a strip mall near Virginia Beach. She was carrying a black carry-on bag over one shoulder and a Pacific War history book under her arm. She was holding a cup of coffee she'd bought at a 7-Eleven on Route 60, which she'd stopped at because she was hungry and it was the first thing she'd passed since the base drop-off point. The coffee was already losing the battle with the November cold. She walked to her car. She put the carry-on in the trunk. She put the book on the passenger seat. She got in and started the engine and turned the heat to high. She sat for a moment. The strip mall's lights were on, the orange flat light of parking lots at night, the kind that makes everything look slightly like a movie shot from a low angle. A truck went by on Route 60 with its high beams on, and then the road was quiet. She thought about the actuator catch at the leading edge flap. She thought about the angle of climb off the runway, the way the aircraft had gone vertical with the particular violence of a machine that cost more to train a person to fly than most people would earn in a lifetime of work. She thought about the 12 decisions and whether the 12th had been the right call, and concluded with the dispassionate rigor she applied to her own performance reviews that it had been. She thought about Carver giving her the lead without discussion. She thought about Brewster in the terminal, the piece of paper, the 2 syllables that were her other name in the other world that existed parallel to the one where she had a credit card and a library card and a carry-on with enough packed. She picked up the coffee. She turned on the radio, a station playing something with strings that she didn't know and didn't try to identify, and she pulled out of the parking lot and onto Route 60. She drove. The night was clear, and the stars were visible above the flat coastal plain, and the radio played the thing with strings until it ended, and something else came on. And she was already thinking about the next thing. She was always already thinking about the next thing. That was the nature of the work, and also she had come to understand over the years. The mission settled behind her like something completed, filed, moved to the past tense. The present was the dark road and the cold coffee and the stars. She drove past a sign that said Virginia Beach, 12 miles. Nobody saw her go. That was the point. That had always been the point, and she had never in all the years of it found that point anything other than correct. If this story reached you in the way it was supposed to, subscribe to Silent Salad Stories, like the video. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that extraordinary lives. We make these stories for the ones who serve without needing to be seen, and for everyone who's ever sat in seat 14B next to someone they completely underestimated. Self-rating. 10 tenths opens immediately in the seat, in the moment. Builds through accumulation of detail. Each thing she notices, each thing Marcus Webb misses, the growing gap between what the cabin understands and what she understands. The intercom is the turn. The kitchen table and parking lot structure gives the aftermath the weight it needs. GHOST 7 is never explained at length. The mystery is the point.